All right. Good evening, everyone. Happy Wine Wednesday. We are excited to be with all you guys. It is 7 p.m. here in New York City and 7 p.m. in Gardner, New York, where we are headed. I'm Sam Kimball from New York Wine Events. Thank you for joining us on virtual day trip to wine country. We're here for award-winning Hudson Valley wines with a pioneering vineyard and winery. A very special trip. We're going to Whitecliff Vineyard and Winery in Gardner, New York, about 80 miles north of New York City. And our theme is, wait for it, sustainability and wines made from exclusively New York State grown grapes. As you may know, many of you may know, New York State is a major wine growing region. There are over 1,600 family vineyards and well over 400 wineries in New York State alone. I think it's approaching even 500. I think it's more than 450. In Gardner, New York, in the Hudson Valley and Ulster County, broadly, the area is known for not just wine and vineyards, but also the Shawangunk Mountains. And you can see some of that topography and landscape in my background here. Beautiful scenery. Also known for agritourism. There are many farms, wineries, nurseries, and more. And of course, it is also known for being a great area for outdoor activities, rock climbing, hiking. It's a mountainous area. And not least of all, nearby is a wonderful State University campus, State University of New York, New Paltz campus, also known as SUNY New Paltz, which is in the neighboring town of New Paltz, next to Gardner. So welcome one, welcome all. Please ask any questions or make comments along the way here as we're in the session in the chat function in Zoom, and we will answer all of those on the fly, live as we go. We love getting questions, especially in the middle of the conversation. So just fire away and any comments. And also in the chat, if you would right now, hit us up in the chat and let us know where you are tuning in from. We love seeing where everybody's located. Typically, there are people from all around the country. So hit us up in the chat and let us know where you're at. So this evening, we are going to travel virtually to Whitecliff Vineyard and Winery in the Hudson Valley, again in Gardner, New York, about 85 miles north of New York City. We've been to Whitecliff many, many times on our day trip to wine country tour experience, which we run. Actually, these days we run 7 days a week. Whitecliff is open most of the week. I don't think it's 7 days at this point, but we do have a number of places we go to in the Hudson Valley as well as Long Island. And I want to say hello to people who are tuning in. Kathy and Steve from Long Island, good to see you guys. Scott from Glen Rock, Michelle from Stamford, Connecticut. We got Connecticut in the house, and Steve from Sonoma, California. Welcome, guys. So let's take a look at Whitecliff and where it is on the map here. I'm going to put a map in my background, and you'll see at the bottom to my left there's New York City at the bottom, and then there's a red map pin for Whitecliff Vineyard and Winery all the way up in Gardner. So it's about 85 miles due north of New York City. Absolutely beautiful location. And you see again in the background here, some of the mountainous terrain. That's part of the Shawangunk mountain range. We'd like to bring in our special guest and introduce Tristan Migliore, who is the general manager and the wine club manager at Whitecliff Vineyard and Winery. Tristan, welcome. It's great having you.
Hi, Sam. Hi, everybody. You're real close on my last name. It's Migliore. The G is very confusingly silent, which is not intuitive unless you're Italian.
Sorry about that. I'm always have a little trepidation when I'm about to say your last name, and I've known you for a while, but one of these days I'm going to get it right on the first pass.
I am not bothered. I've heard much worse mispronunciations than that.
I would imagine.
So yeah, I'm my current title is general manager and wine club manager. But it being a family business, I've had every title from idiot down to just regular manager or field hand, anything you can imagine. I've probably been called in the family business. I've done every job there is that you can do in wine, because growing up on the farm, chores were basically, all right, we're pressing, 10 tons of grapes today, and you got to come down and help me press these grapes and then start the fermentation process. And tomorrow you're going to be punching down the cap. And for the next 2 weeks, you're going to be doing that, to pruning and tilling, planting new vines, trellising, literally everything there has to do with wine. I've done it at one point. My family started the business in 1979. Which is older than me. And it was a hobby of my dad's that became a business and full-time job for both my mom and my dad, as they both retired from their jobs. And now they work a lot more and a lot harder than they did when they had other careers.
Well, you beat me to it, because I was about to say, I think, because you're a young guy, I believe the winery and the vineyard starting in 1979 with your dad kicking things off then, which is what, 42 years ago?
Yeah.
That predates you. So I would imagine that there were days or nights when either before or after you did your homework, you were actually doing something to help make wine on the property.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely older than me. I'm 33, soon to be 34. So I'm not quite as old as the winery, and I don't know that I'll be able to catch up.
Probably
but
not.
Yeah, I think, my folks definitely started it really, truly as a hobby. My dad's first introduction to winemaking was being a kid in the Bronx, and his uncles literally from Germany and Italy, respectively, making wine in their basements in the Bronx, and him being a kid and being like, oh, this seems pretty cool. And then, years later, him getting a master's degree in organic chemistry. And that is literally what winemaking is. So it's definitely a far cry from that, from just being a hobby and making wine in the basement. I see the question there. Yeah. My most disliked task would definitely be cleaning. I did not have any interest and do not have any interest in being a winemaker. So we have a winemaker that is not my dad. He is more vineyard manager these days. And he had an apprentice that worked under him, Brad Marks, who is our winemaker currently, who is extremely talented. His job is very secure, because I have no interest to do that job, because winemaking is 9/10 cleaning and the other 10th chemistry and creativity. That would definitely be my most disliked task on the vineyard.
So lest anybody not be clear on it, the fact of the matter is that we're looking at now a photo, correct me if I'm wrong, of the winery in the foreground. And lest anybody not know, that red house in the background is where you grew up.
Yeah, that's my parents' house right there. And this used to be the winery, but this is the tasting room. So
the tasting room, right.
In the larger doors you see just on the forward right edge of the vineyard there, like those barn doors there, that leads into what is currently our lower tasting room space and event space. Those other doors lead into storage. That's where we store our wine and bottles and glasses and such. But in a very small portion and footprint of that building is where we did all the production for the first about really 20 years of the business, more than that, 25 years of the business. And now we have a whole other production building that's not pictured in this photograph that is larger than that total building. So when people visit and they ask about that, I point to our production building and then show them the interior space. If you can imagine everything that can fit in that building being squeezed into this space, that's what growing up on the vineyard and in the business was like.
Yeah, no,
we've grown a lot since then.
And you're in farm country there. You see in the background it's a dairy farm or some sort of a farm with a silo, and you're right underneath the Shawangunk Ridge there, which is a big topography event in the region. I mean, that's a huge thing.
It is. It's definitely really storied farmland. We've been our area before my family bought it was cattle land. Before that, it was orchards. The area in general is very famous for apples. The Hudson Valley is a very large apple producer. And, we have another site up by Hudson, New York that has been in fruit growing for the last 250 years or so. And we've just started doing grapes there. It is very much an agricultural region. The property surrounding us, there are houses, of course, but there's also several hundred acres of cattle land and cornfields and wheat fields that is immediately against our farm.
Yeah, and here you see another vantage point of, that cliff and mountain rises right up from near your property, and it's I don't know how many 100 feet, but it's massive.
I think I don't want to misquote the tallest point. It looks a lot bigger than it actually is. It's dramatic scenery. So there's a lot of really steep elevation, and there's lots of really, truly world-class, spectacular hiking and climbing, which is how my folks met, actually, is climbing on the mountain. And it's not super huge. So like if you're comparing it to, the Rockies or the Sierras, it is not anywhere in the league of that. It's East Coast topography.
Yep. But yeah, for sure. It's pretty dramatic when you're there. And then
absolutely,
this is our winemaker. I want to show a couple of other pictures. This is obviously the winery tasting room and the former production facility. And here's more of the landscape, obviously. I think this is sort of looking south and west, I believe.
Yeah, this is looking south and west exactly. So that's the road that we're on, pictured in the right-hand portion there. It's the McKinstry Road. Our property goes beyond that closer tree line in the center left to the hedgerow you can see beyond that. So we have a much larger property than we just grow grapes on. On our home vineyards, it's about 26 acres planted. And then we have another vineyard in Hudson, New York. We have another 10 acres. And we have another small site that is just outside of Newburgh in Marlborough that is 5 acres we just use for method champagne champagne production.
Right. So this is a great lead into a question that I wanted to dig a little bit into this evening. And that is, you are, compared to other Hudson Valley wineries, many of which get their grapes for making wine from other parts of New York State, and some even get them from other parts of the country. You're largely an estate winery when you can be with the selections you make every year. Estate winery, for probably everyone knows this watching, but in case you didn't, that's when a winery grows the grapes on the vineyards right there on property, makes the wines, and bottles them. The whole process from cradle to grave, from seed to grape to bottle, is at the winery. Compared to other Hudson Valley wine producers, and Hudson Valley is one of the 4 major wine regions in New York State, you really are largely an estate winery, whereas many others are not. I know it depends on the vintage year how much of your selections are fully estate grown and bottled, but talk a little bit about that. I think it's a fascinating process, and it's kind of how your dad got started, was really as a vineyard, as somebody who understood the growing of the grapes.
Yeah, I would say, really for the growing of the grapes, I would disagree. Yes, it's the first step for how the family business got started, because he's got to plant the grapes before he can make the wine. But the growing wasn't the first interest for my dad to start in the wine production, but it definitely is the first necessary step. And we do absolutely take the agricultural aspect of the business very seriously. It is, I totally would agree, something that really sets us apart from others in the Hudson Valley and in, I would say, the whole East Coast, but New York in general. We take growing the grapes very seriously. We have, as I mentioned, just a little under 30 acres between our 3 different sites, all of which have different microclimates. And to respond to one of the questions that was in there earlier, the mountains do affect that. They're not a magic bullet, but it can either buffer us from negative weather patterns coming from the north. The mountains are sort of directly to the west of our property, running in like a north-south line. And so sometimes it can like help soften or like buffer negative weather coming into us, but can also conversely have negative weather coming from the east kind of sit on top of us, which is not great. So it is definitely a double-edged sword with the mountains, but that's only for our home vineyard. We grow.
How close by is the other vineyard again, Tristan?
It's about an hour drive, or from Gardner to Hudson, New York, which is where the second farm is mileage wise, I think it's something like 30-ish miles about. Right. Yeah, like 25, 30 miles, I think, but it's about an hour drive, which is how the Hudson Valley works. It takes a lot longer to get everywhere than you think it should. Yeah. But we take the agriculture really seriously. We grow whatever we can. And for our total wines listed, which any of you watching, if you want to just listen to us talking and look at the website, you can view our menu on there. You can see we have a lot of wines. I think we have just under 30 different blends and straight varietals listed there right now. We make more than that. Of course, that shifts throughout the year. And wherever possible, those are estate grapes. That is a real primary focus and concern for us. But of course, as you mentioned, Sam, that is dictated largely by weather. There's years where we just won't get a harvest at all for something that we grow a lot of. Like in 2019, we had we had literally no Chardonnay that was able to be picked from our home vineyard. And we had about 3 acres of Chardonnay planted, which we since replanted for other varietals because of this problem. But, it's a varietal traditionally done pretty well for us. But with climate change, we had so much damage to those grapes from a late frost, which, in a year like this is still very potential for us to get frost, where it's been pretty mild for us here in New York so far. Really very mild, pretty early spring, but we still, through the end of this month, really, there's a risk of there being a frost event. If the vines have started to bud, you can get real damage and then really no harvest or really reduced harvest from them. So in years like that, we have to buy Chardonnay grapes because Chardonnay is a wine that we've won a lot of serious awards for and people expect us to make. There's fans of it, wholesale customers depending on it. So to not produce it is really not an option. So we have to then buy some grapes, but it is only ever from New York State. That is a hard rule for us.
Yep. Melissa has a question. Is it a farm as well and or orchard, or is just vineyard grape growing?
Having grown up on the property, I use the word farm very loosely. So we really only grow grapes on the home farm. That open field you see there in the photo behind Sam right now, we use that for hay. We rent other parts of the property for neighboring farmers to rotate cattle onto a couple times a year. But that's not something that really makes us money. It's more just to keep the land in usage. Not that we would not be using it or subdivide it or anything. That's not really an option. More that just we like having the land be used. At our new vineyard in Hudson, we do have a lot of fruit trees, and the rest of the property that is not ours is still an orchard. It's a huge property. I think it's like 400 acres or something like that total, of which we have 10, a little more because we're opening a new tasting room there. I missed that.
Really? That's a news flash.
That is, yeah. So we're hoping to do a really soft open. The new tasting room is very much under construction. The building's there, but the guts are not all in place. And we'll probably do on weekends, just have a farmer's market style situation of just us there. And we'll be selling fruit from that farm there as well.
When will the new tasting room be fully done?
That depends on the contractors. It's not a question that we can answer. Anyone who's ever built anything knows that as soon as you have signed all the papers and given the first checks out, it's kind of out of your hands at that stage. Yeah, that's true. And that's the situation we're in. So hopefully, definitely this year it'll be done. We're hoping before the end of the summer is really when it's going to be. It should have been done already, but.
And where's that going to be again? What part of the neck of the woods there?
At our farm in Hudson. So
in
that
Hudson.
is
so
it's
across the river.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow.
So anyone who knows the area or has been to the Hudson Valley or been to Hudson, if you're going from Catskill, which is on the west side of the Hudson River,
Yep.
like if you're going up on I-87 north from the city towards Albany, just in the north direction, you would get off the Catskill exit. You go over the Rip Van Winkle Bridge, which takes you right across the Hudson River. It's a beautiful bridge, beautiful views, which takes you to the Hudson side of the river, the town of Hudson.
Yep.
And when you're going across that bridge, you see our property there. So you see our grapes, you see the orchard that is not operated by us. I don't want to give that impression. And you see our grapes there too. And that's where our tasting room will be.
That's going to be amazing. Well, we'll have to think about diverting some of our day trip to wine country groups and tours up to that new location when it's done.
We'll be happy to have you.
So Steve has a question, about how many cases does the winery make per year?
The average is usually around between, I'd say like 7.5, like 7.5 is the average. Of course, as I would imagine almost everyone listening knows, that depends on the year. Mm-hmm. Just what the weather's been doing.
Or so.
Yeah, about 7,000 is the general average. There's definitely years where we've done more than that. There's been a couple of years where we've done less than that because we made too much in the years before it. Right. So we're the bigger end of small, but we are definitely still a small bespoke family winery, and that's where we plan to stay. We don't have plans to grow into a huge behemoth. We're not aiming to be a Coppola or anything like that.
Yeah, no, but you guys, first of all, and I think was it the Owasting White that won in San Francisco?
No, the biggest award we've ever won was the Riesling, actually.
Oh, the Riesling. Okay.
Second biggest award we won was for our Chardonnay, but the biggest award we've ever won was in 2009. We won Best White Wine in Show for our Riesling at the San Francisco International Wine Competition.
You're going up against all the California wineries there.
We're going up against the world there. I think it's something like 2,500 wines from virtually every country that produces wine in the world. We got the best wine in show there, which is really something worth bragging about. And then not this last year, because last year something crazy happened and there weren't too many competitions. But the year before that, so in 2019, we won at the Atlantic Seaboard International Wine Competition, which is the second largest international competition in the Americas, right after San Francisco, which I just mentioned. We got best white wine in show there for our reserve Chardonnay. It was misreported by a bunch of local media as being the best white wine in the world, and we didn't correct anybody about that. We let them say that.
I am going to momentarily here, I'm going to share my screen and show everybody that Chardonnay.
Sure.
I believe this is the one you were just referring to.
The reserve Chardonnay would be the one.
One moment. I think it's there on the left.
Yep, that is it.
This, folks, is why we love New York State wines and groundbreaking, innovative wineries like Whitecliff. Here's a reserve Chardonnay that sells for $24, $23.95. That won best white wine at a major wine competition. That is, it shows you that certain regions that shall go nameless in California and France and other places, the pricing has gotten so crazy, but you can get great wine and you can get it locally right here in New York. So I love that. And then I think Allison was saying she loves the Riesling. I think here's the Riesling right here.
The one that won would be the one on the left with the gold foil top. That's the traditional Riesling. So we do a regular Riesling and a dry Riesling. And the straight Riesling, which it's off dry, it's about 1.5% residual sugar is the average, depending on the year. So off dry, medium dry, whatever term you prefer. It is the one that we won that award for.
And for those of you who are taking notes, Riesling is, I like to say, the unofficial white wine grape of the state of New York. It grows amazingly well in a cool climate like New York, and New York Rieslings have made a worldwide reputation for themselves. Melissa asks, are you in competition with Brotherhood Winery a lot?
I mean, this may sound like a boilerplate answer, but it's really not. I really don't view any of their wineries in the area as competition. We have a regional wine trail called the Shawangunk Wine Trail. It is meant to be, a organization that allows us to work in collaboration with each other. I personally see other world-class wine being made in the area as a net positive. I don't know how I could see it any other way. Really, a rising tide raises all ships in this situation. If you ask me if the influx of beverage production in general in the Hudson Valley and the state, then that might be a different answer. But other wineries, absolutely no. If people see our region as a destination for wine and quality alcohol, then that's a good thing. And I would not consider it competition.
It's a great answer, and it's certainly not a pat answer. I can attest. I know Brotherhood really well. Like Whitecliff, we've worked with them at a lot of our big tasting events. They've got some great wines. They have a wonderful history. It is America's oldest winery, going back to like 1830 something. But it's a different thing. And Whitecliff is an amazing place, and so is Brotherhood. And I think there's room for really good winemaking and craft in the Hudson Valley as a wine region. So
yeah, I would totally agree. And I think that you raise a point that I would totally agree with, that they just do something totally different from what we do. And I see that as a good thing. This is not, casting shade at all. Like their business model is totally different. They're a different scale. They make different wines. And we are aiming for totally different points on the map. And that means that there's room for both of us and definitely for the other producers in the region as well.
Yep. Steve's got a question. He's asking if Pinot Noir and Chardonnay would grow well in the region.
So they do in general. We grow both of those things. We grow them at, we grow actually both of those at all three of our sites. Because like I said, we have a site that's just for champagne grapes, which of course, we produce. We don't put champagne on the label because they're not produced in the Champagne region of France. So they're not champagnes exactly, but they're made in the Champagne method. And we do the traditional ones. So we're using Pinot Noir grapes and we're using Chardonnay grapes for those. So those are grown at that site. Both of those grapes are grown at our home vineyard, which is what, again, is pictured behind Sam. And then our new vineyard in Hudson, both of those are grown there as well. So Pinot Noir is called the heartbreak grape for a reason. It is notoriously fickle and difficult and temperamental about like weather conditions. And the Hudson Valley is not immune to that. We have, especially with climate change, much more unpredictable weather patterns and greater extremes in those weather patterns. And Pinot Noir is pretty famous for not liking that. It likes consistency. It likes a very strict median of temperatures. So we do get Chardonnay and Pinot Noir grapes from our vineyards, all three sites. The quality and quantity depends on the year, and that'll dictate if we have to are forced to supplement our harvest with buying from someone else in addition to our own grapes. But all of our production for those varietals always at least features our own grapes if it is not exclusively our grapes. And we always label our wines when they are exclusively grapes from our home vineyards.
Question from Kurt there in the chat, Tristan.
I couldn't see it.
Do some of your vineyards have an amount of elevation?
Yeah, the Hudson Vineyard specifically has a little more elevation than our home vineyard does. The main feature, like geographically for the home vineyard, is the mountains, which I'd already kind of explained the effect of. We have some hills on the home vineyard, but they're pretty minimal. They're not very high. They're not very steep. So the more sensitive varietals are obviously planted there. That's where the Pinot Noir and the Merlot at our home vineyard is planted. At the vineyard in Hudson, which I wish I'd given you photos of because I'm talking about it a lot. There are photos on the website for anyone who's curious. It does have a very steep grade to it. It gets very steep, like down to, pretty close to like 45 degrees at different points of it.
Really?
Yeah, it's very steep at points, like to the degree where using the tractor is complicated. We have to use weights on it and such, and then only drive it in specific directions. And it's obviously right next to the Hudson River, as I already explained. That is more important, the elevation on that site there, because it gives, confusingly in this situation, lake effect. Obviously, it's a river. It's not lake effect, but that's the term for the heat exchange we get. So it just doesn't get as cold at that site there. And then with the steep grade to it, cold air really just flows off of it and down to the river. It's not high elevation. I think it's a couple hundred feet, which is laughable for people who grow in much more mountainous regions. But compared to our home vineyard, which is not very high above sea level at all, we're not growing it on the mountain. We're growing it next to the mountain.
Yep. So we're gonna get started tasting wines momentarily. Do you have the selections with you, Tristan?
I did not make it over to the farm today. I was working from home today, so I didn't.
You know them intimately, so we'll talk through them. But one last thing before we jump into, and we'll answer a couple more questions as well. But before we jump into wine tasting and talking about the specific wines, you are an all vegan winery.
Yes.
Every wine you make is absolutely vegan, 100%. Tell us about that.
The main reason for it is me. I've been vegan for about a little less than 20 years. And wow. It was kind of conditional for me continue to be a serious part of the family business. So like, if you want me to do this, we're not using animal products. And they took that seriously because it wasn't an idle threat. But it is more than just me, obviously. It is really about our general broad as a business focus on sustainability. So, animal politics and animal rights aside, which is much more my thing than the business has nothing to do with that. It is really about sustainability. And I feel like it's a very important thing to be aware of for everybody, whether you eat meat or don't. I'm certainly not casting any judgment on that. It is, a pretty widely known fact that animal agriculture contributes to global warming. Global warming is something that, just if we're going strictly from a micro selfish lens for us at the Vineyard, it affects us pretty heavily. Yep. So anything we can do to ameliorate that, we do. And not using isinglass or gelatin or egg whites in the filtering and fining process for any of our wines is something that we can do. And we do a lot else besides that for sustainability focus. But that is a big thing for us for sure. I see that question there about sulfites. Our wines are not free from sulfites. We are not an organic or natural production. All wines, whether they are organic or natural, are going to feature some sulfites naturally anyway. We do add sulfites to our wines. We want to make sure that we get something that is going to be consistent in terms of palate and taste to everybody. We do make a couple non-intervention, which is our term for natural wines as well. They're limited releases, usually make like 40 or 60 cases of them. So we do make a couple wines that are lower in sulfites, but just by virtue of them being a wine in general, they're going to be naturally occurring sulfites. So there is none that we have that features zero.
Great answer, and super interesting about the vegan side. I will say that knowing your wines well, I can share with everybody watching that the wines are absolutely spectacular. They're delicious. They're artisanal, handcrafted, wonderful. And I mean, I'm not a vegan. I never would have known, oh, well, these are all vegan. It's not like, oh, they're not as good or they don't have the same flavor characteristics. They're amazing. So I think it's super interesting to get that background. And probably a lot of people didn't know that traditionally in the winemaking process, egg whites and things like that are used in some of the processes that make wine. So.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely and I thank you for saying that, by the way. I mean, we certainly want them to not be singled out as, being like a secondary or alternative class of wine. That's certainly not what we're aiming for doing. And the products that we use to make the wines vegan are really by a scientific measured metric better in terms of getting a better, higher quality wine. So we don't use, as I mentioned, like the three things that would make the wine not vegan: isinglass, egg whites, or gelatin. What we do use for our filtering and fining is a vegan potato starch gelatin. And we use a flow clear system for that. And a flow clear system with this vegan potato starch gelatin means that we have less oxygen exposure during production of the wines. And as I'm sure everybody can attest, and you can test at home, if you just open a bottle of wine and leave it out for a while, I'm sure all of us have done that, it will lose its aroma and its characteristics for palate. that happens in production as well too. So as much as you can mitigate oxygen exposure during production, the greater you can ensure that you're going to make a more flavorful, more aromatic, and therefore better quality wine. So again, even sustainability aside, it's a better way to produce wines. And I do think that, my personal politics aside, it is the way of the future for winemaking. I think that's where people are going to be headed.
Now, super interesting. Melissa's asking, would you say biodynamic to describe?
No, I would say sustainable. So
yep.
we're not focused on biodynamic. We're not focused on non-intervention or natural. We're not organic. We are focused on sustainability. So all of those different titles and caveats come with a lot of, maybe a lot of is the wrong word, but they come with like rules and qualifiers. They have sets of like metrics that you need to check. There's a lot of boxes on all of those different things that you need to be sure, like, okay, doing X, Y, and Z for those things. For sustainability, it's much more about a broader focus on like overall impact to broader ecology and to your like your regional and your specific on-site environments. So that's what we take into consideration most. And there's certainly a lot else that we do for our farming and for our production, and for our business in general, that we don't have to do, that you wouldn't have to do for biodynamic or organic, but we feel that we need to do just as a business to be responsible. So that goes down from everything to not spraying anything at all if any of the birds on our property are in their fledgling season. So if the swallows and the kestrels and the red-tailed hawks, all of whom we do a lot to foster their populations on the property, we created nests for all those things because they're good to reduce pest populations. We don't spray anything because we don't want them to be bringing back food to their fledglings that could damage them or poison them. So even if we need to, we're not going to spray any anti-fungicides when the kestrels are feeding their young or the swallows are feeding their young. We don't smoke the vines when there is a frost event. We have a wind machine, and the wind machine is working off to blow the air around and reduce the damage from cold. Yep. Down to in the tasting room, we don't use plastics for serving the tastings to our customers. Even during the pandemic, we used a cornstarch derived biodegradable serving cups, and we recycle fanatically everything that comes into our property. We're not going to buy something that comes in plastic packaging. We'll find another producer that can give us a green product. So it's really a top-down approach for us for sustainability. That is agriculture first and then everything else after that.
Yeah, it's super interesting and really impressive. All right, well, let's jump into tasting some wines. We're going to start with, I think, is the Awasting White the most popular wine that you sell?
Definitely. It is by far our best seller, not just bestseller for whites. It's our best selling product that we make and we sell. It is a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Vineyard. So two like hybrid varietals, which they work really well in the Hudson Valley. They work really well in cold climates, especially. And it's about 70-30 for Sauvignon Blanc versus Vineyard. It is a dry wine, not overly so. It's about 0.8% residual sugar. So it's really on the upper end of what is considered to be technically dry, but fruit forward is how I describe it. It is very light. It's a crowd pleaser. I joke all the time that it is our party wine. If you're going to a dinner party, you have no idea what everybody's going to be agreeing on, what you're going to be eating. This is one that everyone's going to be able to drink and enjoy. It's not too sweet. It's not too dry. It's kind of a Goldilocks wine. I get a lot of really, really light, kind of milder honeydew melon and like lighter like rose and lily notes in the aroma. On the palate, it's got some nice like bright acidity on the finish, a little bit of like more, to my taste, like orange rind acidity on the end. And then those same, aroma points on there, definitely like rich melon notes in there.
Is this a wine, Tristan, that makes, when you drink it and you enjoy it, does it make you thirsty or does it make you hungry?
This one for me makes me thirsty. If you're asking me personally, I find it to be very light, crisp. It is not one that I think needs to be paired with anything, frankly. Like it's meant to be a like hang out and drink it wine. But that being said, you can definitely pair it pretty easily with lighter foods. I mean, I would do this with salads or fish if you're eating fish, something like that. Something that's going to be like lighter and not need something like really substantial or like weighty to balance it out.
Yeah, this wine, I love this one. This is refreshing. It's got nice acidity. It makes me thirsty. I want to take it to the pool or the beach or the park, or just hang out and enjoy it. It doesn't need to be paired with food per se.
I would definitely agree.
So awesome. All right. So the next one we're going to talk about is the dry rosé, which is also a very popular wine at Whitecliff. Tell us a little bit about this. What are the grapes that it's made from, and what sort of occasion, or what is the perfect time and place for this wine?
So the dry rosé is a blended rosé. It's not a Saignée. It is white and red blended together. The blend changes every year. It depends on what we're doing production-wise. The current vintage is mainly Cayuga as the whites, which, don't be scared, it's not a sweet wine as the name implies. It is totally dry. There is no residual sugar. It is totally dry. And then it has a little bit of Cabernet Franc, a little bit of Duchaunac and Frontenac, and there's a little bit of Merlot in this vintage as well. But for the next vintage that we have coming out for next release, it is different wines entirely, but still with mainly Cayuga as the base grape in there.
So this is interesting because there are lots of rosés that are single varietal. This is a blend of red wine grapes to make this rosé.
We definitely make single varietal rosés as well too. We currently have a Pinot Noir rosé and a Gamay Noir rosé that are traditional Saignée single varietal rosés. So we do rosé literally every different which way you can do it. We do a like a kegged sparkling dry rosé. We do a barrel aged rosé. We do the two that I just mentioned. We love rosés. We do rosés every different which way. They're all dry though. So if you're looking for a super sweet one, we're not making any of those.
Yep. By the way, for anybody watching, if you're going to be near Whitecliff anytime in the near future, they are selling the previous, which I believe is this 2018, the previous year's rosé, which is still great. At the tasting room, it's $9.95. So
yeah, it is. And if you wanted to get that shipped, and you wanted to take advantage of that sale, it's not on the website. Please just send an email to the website. Those go to me. I'll be happy to send them to you at the $9.95 price. It is fantastic, and I'm very proud of it. It's only on sale because we have the next vintage ready to go. So we need to get through the last few cases we have of it.
So for about $100, a little bit more, you're going to get a case of amazing dry rosé from Whitecliff Vineyard and Winery. All right, so we're going to move along to the.
I did see a question there about
yes.
the blends for the rosé, and I wanted to answer it if I'm able to. I didn't see it. They disappear from me.
Oh, so yeah. So very interesting blend. Very unusual to find such a blend of rosé wine. What country is that unusual grape from? It's originally France, right? Céval?
Céval Blanc is, so it's a hybrid varietal, or which you don't need to point out. It's not vinifera. So what that means is it's not like genetically modified or anything. Apologies for everyone who knows this already. But what it means is you're taking cuttings from a couple different varietals and you're letting them grow together. You're letting the dominant genetic traits come out on top, and you're just doing guided evolution, essentially. In a really primitive way, you're literally taking cuttings and letting them grow together, and the dominant traits went out. So it is originally from France. It is based on Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, I think the two main grapes that it is based on. But it's it's sort of like comparing a guava to a papaya. Like, it's a different thing at this point now. It has hybrid.
It's a hybrid grape.
Exactly.
Couple of quick questions, lightning round here, Tristan. What are the ABVs, the average by alcohol by volume on these wines?
For virtually
what's the ABV on the Awasting?
all of the wines that are listed that we're trying right now are 12.5%, and virtually all of our wines hover around the 12.5% range. So they're all listed at 12.5%. State gives you about 1% of leeway either direction in that. So there's a couple wines where it might be like, 12.9 or something like that. It never really goes below that because we don't want to have something that's going to be too light. But there's a couple wines that we make that are around like 14.5 or so. Only a couple of vintages we've ever done that have been that high, and that's much more about the year for the harvest and such.
Yep. Kurt had a question about, which is a great question, Kurt, the saignée method of making rosé. The question is, what is saignée?
So saignée is French for bleed. What that means is you are literally bleeding off juice during the initial fermentation of a red wine. So, for example, this isn't the rosé that we have listed for the tasting today, but for our Gamay Noir, which is a Saignée rosé, we picked Gamay Noir grapes from our vineyard, and we were pressing it, and we're sending it to ferment, which is literally just a different part of the building that we do the production in. And, we're adding whatever yeast we're using to guide the fermentation process, starting to ferment. We bleed off some of that juice during the fermentation process, usually about, for that one, I think it was like 24 hours in the process. That number varies depending on what you're aiming for. And then you let that juice that you bled off from the fermentation ferment separately. What that does is give you a darker and richer red wine. So the Gamay Noir that is done as traditional red wine for that vintage is richer and heavier as a result of that process. And then you have this other juice you can ferment. Really, it's technically wine already at that point because the fermentation has started, it's just not done with the fermentation process. You let that ferment on its own, and then you've got a rosé. So it is the most traditional process for making a rosé, and it is one that we do in addition to the other methods, like for the dry rosé, which is blended.
Excellent. All right, so let's move on to the Gamay Noir. We're moving into red wines here. This is another favorite in the tasting room, if I'm not mistaken. And tell us a little bit about this. I mean, the grapes, probably, this is a wine that me as a sort of wine intermediate or an advanced novice, like I'm less familiar with Gamay. What is a Gamay and what is this Gamay Noir?
So the Gamay Noir is my personal favorite of our wines, just consistently. It is one that is also one we won a lot of awards for. We've gotten a couple double golds for this, a couple 90-point ratings from wine enthusiasts across vintages. It's one that we consistently do really well for. The Rainbow Room in Manhattan has been carrying this for a number of years now. Gamay Noir, you and others on the call might know it most commonly as like Beaujolais or Nouveau Beaujolais. It is a Beaujolais varietal, and it is vinifera, so it is a French varietal. It is an old world wine, but we're not doing it in the Nouveau Beaujolais method. We're doing just a straight presentation. So we're doing a regular crush. We're doing regular fermentation process, and then a traditional like barrel aging for it, which for this one is a mix of American and Hungarian oak. About I think this one had about like 11 months, with about 30% of that oak being new.
Got it. And does this wine make you thirsty or hungry?
This one for me, I mean, for me personally, this is another one that I just drink on its own. It is one that I drink all the time. It really truly is my favorite of our wines, but it is one that I think can work really well on its own or with like a light pairing of like a charcuterie board, different cheeses and crackers and meats if that's what you're doing, or it works really well balanced out with a lighter pasta dish. So I would do it with, you could do it with like a marinara or like a bolognese or something like that. But I think it works really well, actually, kind of counterintuitively with a pesto. Yeah.
I did not. I learned something new tonight, and that is that the light fruit-driven red wines of Beaujolais, that this is kind of a standard bearer for that region.
It is, absolutely. I mean, Gamay Noir is a standard for the region for sure, and weather-wise, the Beaujolais region as well as the Alsace is pretty similar weather-wise to the Hudson Valley. it's not like a direct correlation. You can't like draw a line between the two, but there's a lot more in common than there isn't. So a lot of varietals that work really well in those regions work really well for us. So for the Gamay Noir, it is always all estate grapes. We grow a lot of it, and it is one that I'm particularly proud of. We do, as I mentioned, the rosé with it, and we are releasing this year shortly. It should be ready probably by the end of the month, a Gamay Blanc. So it's Gamay Noir done as a white wine. So just no skin contact at all.
No skin contact, yeah.
It is, I'm very happy with that one. It's very good. I wish we'd had that ready to show to people now.
For those of you who are watching who are like me or somewhere between Wine 101 and Wine 201, red wine grapes, if you strain the skins out of the juice right after you crush them and make the juice, that makes white wine, because the color that you see, the dark red color in red wine, burgundy color, is from the skins.
You can dial it in even more than that as well too. So what you can do is different press cycles. This is maybe more technical than we need to go into, but I find it interesting. So when you're pressing the grapes, we have a $60,000 German press that is brand new. We got last year, and you can dial in the amount of time and the amount of pressure that you're exerting on those grapes. So obviously a faster and harder press cycle is going to macerate or rupture the skins of the grapes more, and will extract color just by default doing that.
Yep.
So you get a little bit of color that way no matter what. But
Right.
if you do a longer and slower press cycle, then you're going to not extract the same amount of color or any color at all. And then, with our press, there's plenty of presses out there. With our press, the skins are kept totally separate from the juice in general. So it's basically a giant inflatable bladder that expands to the sides of a corrugated stainless steel cage, crushes the grapes with whatever you programmed into the cycle. The juice falls into a trough below it. You pump that off for fermentation separately. And then for red grapes, normally, so for the Gamay Noir that we're talking about here, we put those grapes back in with the to ferment with the skins. And then you're with the fermentation process, in addition to the press cycle, the alcohol production and the yeast interacting is going to extract more of the colors as well. It's going to break down the tannins in the skins of the grapes, extracts that color.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting stuff. And that's fascinating. If you use the press to really crush fast the grapes, you smash the skins, which releases color faster in the process.
Absolutely. And that is a method for making rosé as well, too. So you can do like a carbonic maceration to make a rosé. We don't have one of those currently, but we've done it before. And it's just exactly what we discussed, just really just smashing the grapes essentially and getting some color out.
Melissa's question, is it like a young Gamay, like similar to a Nouveau Beaujolais or what?
No, so we're not doing a Nouveau Beaujolais style for our Gamay Noir. We're doing a traditional straight red fermentation for it. Think of it more like a Pinot Noir in terms of like that category of wine. So it is treated the same way we would treat our Pinot Noir or our Merlot or our Cab Franc, any of our other reds. Obviously, it's going to be a different category. So we're getting different palate points and aroma points out of it, but it is not done in that style, and we don't have any intention to do it.
And so would we say, unlike Beaujolais Nouveau, is this a wine you might age for a while? Whereas like Beaujolais Nouveau, the advice is drink it right away. That's the point of it.
Yeah, that's definitely true for Nouveau Beaujolais. But for our reds, you can age them. But for any lighter reds, Pinot Noir, Gamay Noir, Syrah, you don't want to age them too long. You can, I don't know. I'm not your boss. You can do whatever you want. But I wouldn't personally age the Gamay Noir more than like 5 years.
So it's ageable, unlike the Nouveau Beaujolais.
Yeah, but not ageable in the same way that something like a Bordeaux blend or like a Petit Verdot or a Merlot is going to be. You're going to get diminishing returns on a lighter red for Gamay Noir specifically.
Yeah.
After a certain amount of time.
It's not like a Bordeaux where you lay it down for 5-10 years, or like a Cabernet from California.
No, definitely. I would say 5 years would kind of be the outer range of what I do for the Gamay.
Yeah. Which reminds me, I need to go into my cellar and take some things and drink them, because I think they've been in there for a while. So anyway, all right, let's move on to the last one, which is my second favorite at Whitecliff, which is the Red Trail Blend. I love this wine. And I don't really know that much about the grapes or the specific blend composition, but tell us about the Red Trail Blend.
Sure. So the Red Trail is our second most popular wine across the board. It's right after the Awasting White.
God, Tristan, I'm such an obvious person. Like I like the best-selling white, and I like the best-selling red. I need to step up my game a little bit.
No, what it means is you're in good company. That's what it means. It is. I mean, it's one that I drink too. I mean, I really enjoy it. There's certainly wines that we make that I don't drink at all, and the Red Trail and the Awasting are absolutely ones that I do bring home and drink. It is. It's medium bodied. You know, I would hesitate to call it off dry because it's just right at 1% residual sugar. So it's off dry would be like a little disingenuous to that. It's right on the line where it's not dry anymore. Fruity is definitely the word that I use to describe it. It is a blend of de Chaunac, Frontenac, Noiret, and there's a tiny bit of Cab Franc in there as well. In that order of importance, it's non-vintage, just like the Awasting, so the percentages going into it changes every year. We're aiming much more for consistency in both those wines with Red Trail, especially. We want it to be something that you can reliably pick up. These are our flagship wines, so they're ones that really make sure we can keep the lights on, and we want them to be as consistent as possible in terms of palate points. For this one, I would definitely describe it very much like lots of berry notes. For me, I get a lot of like raspberry and blackberry notes in the aroma and the palate.
Yep.
A little bit of black pepper in the aroma, and I definitely get a lot of black pepper on the finish of the palate. Not to say that it's overly spicy, but it has a nice bit of pepper that's adding a little bit of body to it at the end.
This wine makes me hungry.
I would agree for sure. I mean, this is one that I think works really well. Again, I would say, you know, it really depends on what you're aiming for with it, but I would do this actually with spicier food because it's a little fruitier. Mm-hmm. So that could take it as you want. You know, I've had this wine work really well with chili, actually. You get a little bit of a spicier chili because this one has, again, not sweet, just about 1% residual sugar, but a lot of like raspberry notes. It kind of balances out pepper like that really well. And I've had it work really well. My dad is a very consummate chef for pasta, especially. And he does a very spicy marinara sauce with garbanzo beans with a lot of cayenne pepper. This balances very well with that cayenne pepper.
Yeah. No, I can imagine because I know the wine well. It is definitely one of my favorites.
You know, when I start talking about it, there's no way for me to talk about it without getting really nerdy about it. Well,
you are a super smart and interesting person, and I know you well, and I've heard you talk about these wines, and I've heard your parents talk about them, and frankly, it's one of the reasons we love coming to Whitecliff on the tour. And I agree with Kurt. Not at all. No apology necessary. Very informative, super interesting. If you are anywhere within striking distance of New York City, make your way up to Ulster County to Whitecliff. Such an amazing place, and it's near and dear to my heart because I'm from right across the river in Dutchess County, and one day I'm going to be back there. I'm working my way back. So
hopefully soon.
Tristan, thank you so much for doing this, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Hey, Jeff. Good to see you. Lots of people, lots of folks that we know here. Nancy, how are you doing? Come join us next week. We are going to do a really fun and interesting tasting with a leading wine producer on the North Fork of Long Island, Raphael Wines. They make some extraordinary wines as well. So join us next week at 7 o'clock, May 19th. So thank you so much, Tristan. We'll see you soon on the tour. And we'll see everybody soon on the broadcast here. Be well.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Have a great night, everyone.
All right. Be safe. Thank you.